Hello and welcome back to episode 8 of Wafflin Around with your host Tyler Sayuda. Today we have a very special guest, Derek. Derek, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Tyler. So I'm Derek Persicki. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Ohio. Tyler graciously asked me to be a part of his podcast this time around. I'm excited to really talk all things goalie, anything mental health related. I guess just one quick caveat: I am a government employee, so all the opinions and information I share is my opinion, but other than that, I'm just excited. I'm 38 years old. I'm still playing, I guess, somewhat competitive men's league. Until at least either my hips give out or something else, So
For sure,
I'm
for
just
sure.
counting my lucky stars, but I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I mean, my whole goal going into this was kind of to get your aspect or your opinion behind some of the mental side of hockey. So, in your opinion, what's one of the most, let's see, taxing parts about playing goalie? We'll go there first, just to
Yeah,
get it
I
rolling.
think personally, it's kind of changed over time, but I really like this question. When I was really young, I think it was letting go of of a goal getting by me. I think for a little while, you know, I I, I started playing hockey right around the age of 5, up in Cleveland. Started playing goalie full time right around 9. I was really convinced I just wanted to play goalie ever since I was little, so I didn't really have much of I didn't really feel one way or the other besides goaltending. I think as I got a little older and I learned some more skills about either, taking care of myself, maybe even kind of mindfulness tricks we can talk about later. But that I think that came with experience. I think that came with realizing like you're going to get scored on. I mean, even the best goalies in the NHL have like a 91% save average, right? Over their entire career. And so, if I'm shooting for something like that and I feel like I'm reaching some sort of healthy balance where, I'm not beating myself up over that goal, if I'm getting myself ready for the next shot. And then, like, now as I'm getting older, I think what I'm doing more is what I would say things that are most taxing is kind of really the preparation throughout the day. I think that some people can forget really about self-care throughout the day. It can be easy to forget, drinking water, to get a good night's rest, to eat a certain way. And there are certain ways that I engage in terms of eating to really like optimize how I feel. And so if I'm playing that night or the day before, I actually am thinking about things about 24 hours, maybe 48 hours beforehand about what I'm doing. And I'm a father. I've got 2 beautiful girls, 7 and 5. It, you know, the day can get ahead of you. You have to work, and for some people, you have to go to school. Or whatever it is. And I'm thinking about that kind of nonstop, and it can be taxing. You gotta either have a plan or know what your body works well with, and then go from there.
Yeah, for sure. I like how you mentioned the nutrition as well. I mean, obviously
Mhm,
that's a key factor. Whether you're a player or a goalie, you got to make
mhm.
sure you're getting that fuel in you, and that's critical to good performance, just like sleep. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and if we need to, get lost in the weeds at some point later on, I'd be happy to talk about things like macros, what I do to time my eating. I've learned how to manipulate fasting in a very healthy way, which I would always talk with a dietitian or a doctor with, but you know I I don't think that I would be as successful as I am if it weren't for um, at least one definite big part is the diet. So.
gotcha, gotcha.
Mhm,
So I know you're talking a lot about like the goalie side of hockey, but do
mhm.
you think this specific topic could be generally apply to players as well, or is that kind of just something that maybe they should stay away from?
Well, definitely with the diet piece, I think that that's just really a piece I think a lot of just the average Joe misses. I mean, whether you're an athlete or not. We really kind of live like in a what I would call as like a nutrition epidemic where things are filled with preservatives, chemicals. Our bodies are processing a ton of things. Some people might be struggling with either their weight or body image related things. um, there's lots of things in our food. I mean, I can get really funny and woo woo about it, right? There's plastics and all these things, but that stuff now is coming out in the science. And for me, in terms of like how I feel throughout the day, I can manipulate my food. um, I've learned through some resources. You can start with really basic things, especially for athletes. Things that you can work with a nutritionist on, and most of the time nutritionists are covered by health insurance. There's lots of new programs on social media where you can get a nutritionist for either really low cost or sometimes for free. You can start balancing things like your macros. You can manipulate macros at certain points. And what I mean by macros, right? A lot of people might know this, but just to kind of say for reference, your typical macros are your main three, right? You've got carbohydrates, usually for energy source, protein, usually used for like recovery and muscle building, and then your fats. Fats can be used for a couple different things, which either they can help you keep you full, you can use them to also kind of like modulate or manipulate a little bit of how you feel with your protein and carbohydrate. And they're also, I mean, they're really essential too to the building blocks of things like your brain and your liver, like two of the most important organs to your body. And, you know, like one of the things that I like to do is when I'm manipulating my macros is right the meal before my actual like either game or practice, maybe even coaching. If I really want to be on my A game, I'm really going to dial down my carbohydrates. And what that does for me, the type of person I am, is that it allows me to focus better. I don't feel as sluggish on the ice. I can track the puck better, and then really kind of a whole host of other things. I might actually want to eat afterwards, and that is an okay thing. So, but that's something you got to learn about your body. You got to learn that, like, if you're a type though that does really well on carbo loading, well, play around with that a bit, but know that there's a lot of times where you might be putting more fat in that carbo loading. Like for instance, in pasta, people like to put maybe things like butter and cheese, which might have a little bit of protein but a ton of fat. And so that really changes how your macros will operate, and it might make you feel sluggish, and you're like, why do I not feel like I have all the energy in the world? Well, you might not be carbohydrate loading properly. Whereas like when I'm going to bed, I might do something really high protein. I might eat a bunch of almonds. I might eat a salad. I might do things that really help me increase, recovery. And some of those things have other minerals and electrolytes that are important, like magnesium to help you calm down, and to repair things. They've got potassium. They've got what we call trace minerals. There's so much that really you can do, and it's just really important that like you maybe not only play around with it a bit, but really have some medical supervision or maybe your parents' supervision to really do this right. So,
For sure. Yeah, I think that's going to be very informative. I think the viewers are going to like that a lot.
absolutely.
So I guess my next question, right? You're talking about this nutritional scarcity.
Hmm.
Um, do you, in your opinion, obviously we're looking like at this point we're going to go NHL style,
Hmm.
perfect height. What's the perfect weight for a goalie? Let's say he's 6'3". What is the perfect weight, or is it
Oh man.
necessarily a good or bad thing to be over or under that perfect weight?
Yeah, that's a great point because I've really studied goaltenders in terms of size a little bit, just by stats, getting a sense of like what is really viable. Um, if say you're at that 6'3", I've seen goalies, hover around, and sometimes their stats online aren't even accurate, right? Like they're modulating it to make it look ideal. Um, but definitely you want to be really closely into like some sort of like what they might call is like the ideal BMI, or like you can even kind of creep a little bit into like, what they might call is like so there's different forms of BMI, and I'm actually going to take a look here just quickly. But you really don't want to be in the BMI necessarily where you're at a place, you're at the obese side. That can be really problematic for people. And BMI is this calculation. It's not a perfect science because sometimes BMI can be really wrong. Sometimes you can be very unfit, have really great nutrition. You can be very muscular, and your BMI like just look like you're unhealthy, and that's not true. Um, so that's why it's like really important to maybe work with your doctor, maybe work with a nutritionist, maybe just get an occasional opinion about is your weight healthy? I could maybe make a couple of guesses about what BMI is if you're at 6'3". I'm going to take a look here, but maybe kind of like I'm just going to spitball. It's not going to be perfect. Maybe somewhere around 170, 180. But there are still some goalies there that are right around that height. And they're just a little heavier, right? I mean, you can look at people like Aiden Hill he's on the heavier side, but is he mobile? Can he get from one side to the other? Of course. Uh, you know, Braden Holtby, if y'all remember from Washington Capitals, he's a very muscular dude. His BMI is going to be a little bit on the higher end. He's going to look maybe close to overweight, but his muscle is always weighs more than fat, and so you just have to make sure that calculation. There is some things that certain nutritionists and doctors can do where they measure your weight composition to like say like your ratio of fat versus muscle, and then they can talk to you really about like, hey, do you feel like you can move fast enough in the net? Are you quick? Are you responsive? Right? Like, is it ideal to shoot for 180? Not exactly all the time, right? Because I mean, you can look at people like, Vasilevsky, like he almost kind of looks like a Greek god if you've ever any seen of his Instagram photos. I mean, with his shirt off, he's got like crazy amount of, abs and arms defined, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It just as long as you feel like you've got quickness, you've got lots of power in your legs, you've got a lot of strength in your core, your upper body is strong enough to be still when you're going from up and down, moving around a lot. All of those things matter. And so does the ideal body weight exist? Not exactly, but you can shoot for those things and then see what your doctor says and go from there.
I gotcha.
Hmm.
Um, and as far as I know, obviously we were mentioning how important water is. Just
Hmm.
a quick little thing, right? Bobrovsky
Yeah.
during the playoffs, he loses like 10 pounds of water weight because of how much he
Right.
sweats,
Right.
which I don't know if there's any science to relate one to another.
Hmm.
But I think, at least in my opinion, I perform way better when I am fully saturated with water. I have plenty of water in me. I feel like I have the most power, the most mobility. Like I'm at my peak performance.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I like where your head's at when it comes to water and being hydrated enough. So there's a couple things that I recommend about water, that is really important. I think that a lot of people kind of forget. Um, Plain water is tricky, and the reason I say plain water is really tricky is that it doesn't exactly hydrate you. Plain water is very filtered, often filled with um, a little bit of chlorine, and then depending on where you live in the United States, it might be treated very tracely. Maybe like in Cincinnati here, Ohio, it's got a little bit of fluoride, and that's based off of this really loose science that was given by the American Dental Association that drinking fluoride is helpful for your teeth. Um, but I mean, the thing is though, is that there's a whole bunch of other things you need to quote unquote stay hydrated. You know, for a lot of, I'd say for younger athletes, yes, drinking water is important because younger athletes are not really, oftentimes they're not looking at things like macros, right? They're not looking at their proteins, carbohydrates, fat. And being well hydrated can really maybe balance out things like a mild dehydration, which is a very common thing that people experience most days. Um, Constipation can be a problem too. You don't think clearly, and I know that that might sound funny, but if you're constipated, things are not going to move. Your brain is going to move slowly. So, like, you do need water to allow your gut to allow things to move, and then that allows your gut to move freely, and then that opens up other thing that allows your heart to work well, to pump the the blood that needs, allows your brain and your cerebral spinal fluid to work well. The other thing that I think that is important for people is things like, making sure you're getting your electrolytes in. Electrolytes is a really tricky thing because if you're eating really, really healthy, you can get all your electrolytes there. You can get right. There's the main six, but the main three are the most important, right? So the main three are potassium, sodium, and magnesium. The others are chloride, manganese, and I'm missing the other one, right? Just off the top of my head. But what's so important about all of them, so is that, like, you need the electrolytes really for everything to work, right? So, like, in order for your heart to pump, it needs a ton of potassium, it needs a ton of sodium. If you don't have enough, say for instance magnesium in your blood, you're going to feel sluggish, you're not going to sleep well, you're not going to recover well. You're the next day after a game you might feel really terrible. You might feel slow. And so electrolytes can be put into your drinks. You can buy little packets of things. You can buy things like liquid IV, but you got to be careful of the sugar content in there. If you want to go sugar free, you can buy things like LMNT. There's a whole bunch of, I'm not trying to promote one specific, company, but, and you can do it through Gatorade, but some people, they don't really like some of the chemicals and the dyes. I understand that. They do affect me. And so, hydration is not just drinking water, it's about making sure that you're eating really well. And also, if, say, for instance, if you haven't been eating well, maybe supplementing a little bit of these things, Gatorade, just enough electrolytes that allow you to get through the day. And there's lots of other strategies we could go on later, but I would be getting lost in the weeds. But it I think that, if you're just about, say you're going from peeing from yellow to clear, that's where you're perfect. But if you're peeing too much clear, where it looks like it's just water, you're overhydrating without enough electrolytes. That's what's happening. So that's when I would stop, and that's when I would, if you're worried that you're not hydrated enough, I would start considering eating, maybe like really high protein things like, either meats, green leafy vegetables, things that you can tolerate, right? That have tons of potassium. Maybe if you need to add a little bit of salt in your water, that's okay. Um, but also, you can talk with your doctor about what's healthy for you, because for some people, if you have heart problems, or kidney issues, you definitely got to be careful with salt. And so you got to know those things when you're talking with your doctor, and make sure you have strategies to mitigate.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I don't know
Mhm.
if you've seen that viral clip going around of that one baseball player saying why he eats the bananas because monkey never cramp.
Bananas.
Yeah. Why bananas?
Monkeys never collapse.
Monkeys never cramp.
Because they got all that potassium in there, so
They
that's
do. They do.
especially helpful. In
What's funny
regards,
is, bananas don't have a ton of potassium. There's lots of funny things out there that's debunked that potassium is the most in bananas. You can get more potassium in green things. Avocados have more potassium. Uh, Broccoli has more potassium than bananas. Leafy greens. Asparagus. I mean, the funny thing is that like that was the result of a marketing trick, and most people fell for it, especially that pitcher. But for me, the things that I usually shoot for is vegetables. I mean, that's where I get my potassium, and then the occasional electrolyte packet, maybe the day of a game, or if say for instance I'm feeling sluggish the next morning, if you will. So
Gotcha. And just
yeah.
to kind of loop back to the overhydration,
Hmm.
do you think at some point, like, okay, let's say you're overhydrated, you go on the ice, now you're weighing more than you're expected to, or more than you're
Hmm.
used to. Do you think
Hmm.
that being overhydrated could potentially slow you down on the ice also, kind of make you feel a little slower?
It might, sometimes what might surprise you is you can just, shake a little salt on your finger and then put it in your mouth. That will actually like restabilize things. The funny thing is I keep salt packets with me. I know that that sounds really funny, but I have them in my hockey bag. I really like literally just dip the tip of my finger and put it in my mouth if I feel like I'm really overhydrated. And then I'll just put it, somewhere, on my tongue or in my gums. It does the trick. I think sometimes just getting moving can really be helpful. So say for instance, you feel overhydrated and you really want the things to kind of slow down, get out even if you're not playing. If you're the backup, even get out like in between the periods, get out on the ice and just do some drills where you're moving a little bit. Maybe you're doing some, if you're a goalie, right, like doing some crease shuffles, right? That's easy to do, but really what it does is get your heart pumping, and it will restabilize how you feel. And it won't take long. It'll take less than 15 minutes.
I I definitely like all the nutrition talk that
Hmm.
we're talking about because I mean, from at least my point of view growing up, or at least from other people I watch, there's not a lot of nutritional information. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that's
you do have
definitely
to, you do, sorry to cut you off, but you do have to find it elsewhere. I mean, I totally agree with you that the nutrition conversation is really tricky because personally, I really didn't go on a serious nutrition journey until I was about 32. And that was because I was starting to have some stomach pains. And I really also felt like I wasn't really playing really well. From a competitive hockey stance, I wanted to do better. And I know that it might sound funny, but sometimes the mindset of a goaltender is like always improve, but always accept that what you're doing is good enough. Which I would call that a mindfulness stance, and we can talk about that sometime later. But I started noticing some consequences. I was gaining weight in my midsection that I didn't really like. I wasn't really building muscle the way I wanted to. That also frustrated me. And so I had to find it in other places. I first started with this one gentleman with diet. His name was Dr. Eric Berg. He's a chiropractor. He's not a medical doctor. He was a chiropractor, but it's not about the fact that he's like, either he's not like a medical doctor, and he's not like the most perfect when it comes to nutrition, but he's a great place to start on YouTube. His information is free. He can teach you about what is, like, say, the ketogenic diet. Like, you can learn how to manipulate your diet to be almost ketogenic. You can learn things about sleep from him. Like, he's got tons, like over 5,000 videos that are like 5 to 15 minutes long, easily digestible. Almost anyone can learn. High school level and above can learn from this gentleman, where you can learn about like could certain things do to you, like what does a sweet potato do versus french fries? They are totally different foods, even though they're both potatoes. um, or you can learn about things from sleep. He's got little bits of information there. He'll teach you about how the sun can be helpful, and not only in terms of your sleep and how your mood feels, but also in how your digestion works. He'll talk about movement. He'll talk about lots of different things. You can start learning about what macros are from him. You can learn, you can challenge all the myths that are out there about diet. You can learn about products from him. I mean, yes, he's got his own line of stuff too because he's selling things, and everyone's got to sell something, right? But it's just what's important about it is that you got to really like start somewhere that's digestible. And I found like his information was really helpful, and then it led me down like another rabbit hole. I found another nutritionist. I found another like sleep specialist. I found how it's important to manage your blood sugar, which is another part of diet. How do I get sun in my diet? How do I get healthy movement spread throughout my day? Because sitting all day is actually really terrible for your health and can really slow you down, make you feel sluggish, even if you're eating well, sleeping well. And so, I started there, and then it branched, right? It branched. I actually found out from him that I had a gut condition. I had a really unhealthy bacteria unbalance called SIBO. And so I sought a doctor to take care of that. And that was life changing for me. I found other really great podcasters. Like I found Dr. Andrew Huberman for sleep. Excellent guy. I found a podcast for sleep called A Better Night's Rest. And then I started finding some books on audiobooks based on diet when I started getting really into the weeds and learning basic things like how does a cell work? How does my mitochondria work? Those things actually really matter because they're impacted by potassium and sodium, and they fuel me, right? They give me energy. I learned how to better manage my blood sugar through a gentleman named Dr. Peter Attia. His book Outlive was really great. I learned some cardiovascular things. I learned that breath work, like learning how to breathe differently. If I'm upset, if I'm anxious, if I want to sleep better, you can actually do really funny things with your breath where you can actually get what they call as face tape. You can like literally tape your mouth shut, and you can learn how to sleep better doing that. You can do lots of breathing techniques to open up your bronchial tubes. Like here, I'm going to teach you one now. So like if I were to think about like if I feel really really sluggish and I'm having a hard time breathing, I'm maybe huffing and puffing, I call it the 4-4-8 method, right? So I breathe in for 4, like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I hold it for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I blow out for 8. And it's like it's a really slow, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what that does is it expands my bronchial tubes. It will open up my nasal pathways. I can repeat that about 5 or 6 times in less than a minute. And it will be really game changing. And you can even do it, say, if you're in between reps, right? Say you get a break, you're doing maybe goalie coaching, or you're switching off between your goalie tandem and you really feel winded, you're sucking air. Do that technique, try it out a couple times. And so, if I gave someone advice, if you want to change any of these things, like literally just go to YouTube, and like, if you can go to YouTube without it being a problem and just type in, I want to sleep better. I want to eat better. I want to do breath work better. I want, whatever. It's there now. Like it's at our fingertips. And I didn't have that growing up. Now I do. I'm super grateful. And that's where I started. And that's kind of like my journey of like, not only after 32, I lost 20 pounds in about 2.5 years. I really learned to clean up my sleep. I cleaned up my diet a ton and learned some of these breathwork techniques. During the workday, I take a break about every hour. I have a timer on my Fitbit that hits me up every hour, and I go for a walk in my backyard for about maybe like 5-10 minutes, and then I'm ready to go back to doing what I'm doing. And yes, it breaks up what I'm doing, but honestly, I feel a lot better throughout the day. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
And as far as like the breathing techniques go, do you use any of those breathing techniques maybe to like reset after you get scored on?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say one of the strategies I really like when it comes to breathing techniques is if I'm, say, for instance, like I'm at a point where every goalie has experienced this, right? Like they've been scored on their fifth, sixth, or seventh time, and they're like, I'm done, right? So I would say you can also use the 4-4-8 to reset your brain, and really what that's doing, right? Breathing more, it's going to help you relax, and it's going to give you more energy to think and realize like either there's so many things out of your control during that game. Um, there's probably like you're probably having like an offensive and defensive total breakdown on your team, or you're really having a bad day, one of the two. Both are totally realistic. um, but at the same time too, you're not going to think clearly unless you're calm. And here's really great advice that I got as a parent not too long ago, and it's really helped me actually better understand how our emotions work. So you ever notice when a 3-year-old is crying and crying and crying, you cannot reason with them. Like you just can't. Like they're so inconsolable. So what you do instead is you help them breathe or help them calm down. There's actually a couple of techniques. You can get like an ice pack on their forehead. That really slows things down. It actually mimics brain freeze, because then it like slows your heart down, right? Because your heart, when you're upset, it really gets pumping. And then the only time you can really reason with that 3-year-old is when they're done going, that little sigh that they make. Then they're ready to talk to you. Then they're ready to reason. Then they're ready to make sense. And that's the same for us, even as adults. We cannot make a rational decision. We'll probably stop blaming our teammates, right? We'll stop saying like, oh, like they're just being jerks, right? Like they're not looking at my back door. They don't really have me covered. They're pinching too hard defensively, whatever, right? You can make a ton of excuses, or you can say, look, it's not our day, right? We'll have another day, we'll have another game, we'll play another time, but right now maybe we'll just work on something. Maybe we'll work on squareness or angle or keeping our hands up or tracking the puck or beating the puck before we get there, right? Like you can choose so many other things when you're calm, but when you're upset, you're your worst self, but you're also sending the wrong message to your team, right? Like when you're not calm, your team is upset. They feel like they've let you down, or they get mad at you, one of the two. And neither of those situations are helpful. And they're looking to you to be a leader, right? To be a calm leader, to do what you need to do as a goaltender, which is just stop the shot if you can, right? So and and that's what I do. I do those things. I try to calm down. If breathing isn't your forte, there's other strategies out there. You can talk with a therapist. One of my favorite techniques is actually learning how to visualize like a favorite place, somewhere that's calming. And what that does is it slows your breath down. So some people might think that that's the lake, just like where your buddy's at, right? It might be a beach. It might be their, favorite room in their house. But that's a good way also to calm yourself down. That's one way. There's other techniques. There's what we call is paired muscle relaxation, where you can tense muscles like your eyes, your mouth, your hands. You can tense them for 5 or 10 seconds and then relax. And that too will give you more oxygen to your body. It'll help you relax. It'll help you find a way to get calm. And it's really important, not only in terms of managing anger, frustration, anxiety. You can use those techniques, but you do need to talk to a therapist about, is that safe for you? Is that healthy? That is okay. Like some people, if you overdo those things, you can pass out. You got to be careful. So maybe play around with that kind of stuff during practice, or when there's a coach or a parent around.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely don't want to do anything you shouldn't be. So that's why we're recommending you talk to the doctor. Um,
absolutely.
but I mean, you kind of like went over everything that's really important when it comes to playing hockey, right? You talked about your diet, your nutrition is your diet, but as far as
Mhm.
like making sure you eat good, you sleep good, you get your electrolytes, and especially you got to remain calm. As a goalie,
Mhm.
you got to make sure you do everything right so that when you're in the situation, you don't have to worry about doing something wrong. So, I mean, I think overall, it was a good episode. I think we talked about a lot, and I think it's very informative. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 And yeah, feel free if if there's ever if we need to do a follow-up, I don't mind. I mean, there's a whole host of things I could really get in the weeds about sleep. I mean, maybe I'll give a little teaser. With sleep, I would pay attention to two things. Your caffeine intake and find ways to manipulate that carefully, and then your exposure to bright lights and figuring out what to do with that because being a goaltender and you play on ice, sometimes you play late and then you're exposed to those bright lights. What are you going to do when you get home? And there's a whole host of other things I could talk about with sleep, but absolutely, this was a ton of fun. I totally would do it again. If people have questions in the comments or, if they want to follow up with you, I'd be happy to, give them some answers, do a follow-up podcast episode, maybe even kind of, talk with them while you're there too to, maybe glean some of the insights and then maybe give people an opportunity to ask those follow-up questions or get lost in the weeds like I did.
For
So
sure.
yeah, absolutely. So sounds
Um,
good.
yeah, I mean, I'd love to get you back on here with Chris. I think he'd have some stuff to talk about, bring up. But I do think it was very helpful, and I do appreciate you coming on here today.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thanks again, Tyler. And you know maybe until next time or until I see you on the ice next time.